Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Phil Likes Fights podcast. I am your host, Philip. This is going to be an excellent episode. We have a massive week of boxing to break down for you all today, which is why it's getting the official gigantic boxing weekend seal of approval. Now, you might be asking, what's with the donut iconography? Do I particularly like donuts? What's the purpose of this? What's the trick? And the reason for that is because this is a weekend of boxing that you do not want to miss. Yep, that's right. A horrible dad joke. It's one of those episodes, but all right, enough fooling around. Let's get into it. And of course, the first part of the show is rewinding back to last weekend and seeing what I got right, what I got wrong, how to improve from there, and overall a justification of what my predictions were. So let's get to this next gen card that happened over the weekend, last Friday. A really good card, all around good card. Very enjoyable to watch for the level that this card was at, which was again British domestic level. It offered a lot of entertainment. And in the main event, Pat Brown picked up a knockout in the fourth round. So here's the news. Oh, sorry about that. Let's see. Why is this not? Okay, here we go. So here is this new system that I'm working out with. If I made a prediction and both the fighter I selected and the predominant method of victory was correct, they get a green. So in this case, Pat Brown won by KO in the fourth round. My prediction was KO in the first round, so I still got the correct fighter and the correct method, so that gets a green. As we move on, you're going to see other ways of showing where my predictions went right and wrong, and the color code to match it. If it's too convoluted, I'm sorry, but that's sometimes how my brain works, but hopefully it adds something to the prediction breakdown. All right, but Pat Brown looked all right. I think that for a pro debut, he had a decent level opponent in Federico Grandone. I thought that it took him a little bit to really get into the fight, but once he was in the fight, he was clearly the much better fighter, but did get hit a few times. But again, headlining in your debut is a lot of stress, not something that most fighters will ever encounter in their career. You only ever get one pro debut. I thought that his performance was beyond acceptable for what this level is and for the kind of opponent that they wanted to match him up with in a debut, again, in a headliner spot. Overall, what can you say besides we need to see more? And Eddie Hearn's made it pretty clear. Pat Brown will be fighting several more times this year. I'm going to watch, so good on him. Moving on, what I thought was honestly the real main event is Cameron Vong stopping Jordan Flynn. And, so close. If Flynn, lasted one more round, this would have been a perfect prediction. But I had this fight exactly correct. Ultimately, I knew that this wasn't going to be a blowout in the sense that I knew that Vong wouldn't get him out of there in the first 5 rounds, but you saw the difference in size, the difference in class, and ultimately Cameron Vong with a pretty nice KO win. Of course, the real fight that's on everyone's mind right now is the rematch between Cameron Vong and the man that many people believed beat him last time out in Gavin Gwynn. That's a fight I want to see as well. I think that this was a good confidence booster for Vong. I thought he looked quite good. Good shot selection. He's always had that mean streak in him where he will push for the finish if the opportunity presents itself. Overall, good stuff by Vong, again, at this level, with this kind of opponent. And for Jordan Flynn, he finally got this fight, finally made the occasion. I'm sure he'll go on to have some other decently British level fights, and we'll see what happens with him. But let's move on here, not to spend too much time. So originally, I was flirting with the idea of picking Farnhill to beat Mark Dickinson. Ultimately, I went back, I watched some of their tape, and even though Mark Dickinson was moving up in weight for this fight from 160 to 168, he was just so clearly technically a better fighter. And after a first 2 or 3 rounds or so where Farnhill had some success, Dickinson just took over the fight, better moments all throughout, and picked up a very nice unanimous decision win to capture the English super middleweight title. One thing I think, though, that is kind of interesting is that these guys are fighting for the English title. Meanwhile, you have Callum Simpson as the British super middleweight champion. And yeah, if I'm on Dickinson's team, I'm not looking for a Callum Simpson fight right now because, I think he's a good fighter and all, but I think Simpson would absolutely steamroll him. But again, this is a good career rejuvenating win for Mark Dickinson. Glad to see that. Also, didn't predict it, but William Crawla had a very fun fight with Emmanuel Zion on this card. I thought that was a good one to watch. So overall, yeah, perfectly fun show. But let's move on here to a very anticipated fight. Mikaela Mayer, Sandy Ryan. And I thought that no paint Sandy Ryan was going to be a new mythical fighter. As it turns out, Paint Splash Sandy Ryan is the mythical fighter because this was a clear-cut Mikaela Mayer performance, meaning that my prediction of Sandy Ryan by unanimous decision gets the red mark. That's right. So as you saw before, Dickinson had yellow. That's indicating that I picked the correct fighter, but the wrong method. But this was just all wrong. Sandy Ryan, she gets the red mark, much like the paint that she was marred with in their first fight. But very impressive performance by Mikaela Mayer. Very impressive. I said on the last episode, coming into this, the only chance Mayer or Ryan have at beating Lauren Price is if one girl can truly separate themselves from the other in this fight. And I believe Mikaela Mayer did that. I saw some people saying that maybe Sandy Ryan could have got a draw in this fight, that maybe it was a 6-4 kind of fight. As someone who was picking Sandy Ryan, right? So I make it a point that I don't have any financial stakes on any of this. I don't look at odds. I don't bet money. But I have reputation here. I want to get all my picks correct. If I did score it for a draw, I could argue, it was close. But no. I was fully wrong. I fully underestimated what Mikaela Mayer brought. She completely dominated this fight. I think 7-3, maybe even 8-2. I think a lot of people were giving Sandy Ryan rounds because Mayer was just winning them less dominantly. But yeah, Mikaela Mayer, I think, just realized that Ryan didn't have the power to keep her off. I think she learned that in the first fight. And every time Sandy Ryan threw 1 or 2 punches, Mayer had 4, 5, 6 to throw back. Just too much offense. And now a fight between her and Lauren Price is a lot more interesting. A lot more interesting. I'll still pick Lauren Price. I'll stand by that. I think Lauren Price is the best welterweight in the world. But Mikaela Mayer just made a really, really good argument that she could beat Lauren Price. So I'd love to see that fight next. I recently watched Sergio Mora and Chris Mannix's show where Mannix is arguing that Mikaela Mayer should go fight Claressa Shields at 154. One, I need proof that Claressa Shields can even make 154. And two, just have an undisputed fight. They're saying, Lauren Price is not a big enough name at this point. Okay, but Sandy Ryan wasn't this amazing draw. So Lauren Price isn't big enough of a name to fight her for undisputed, but Sandy Ryan was? Yeah, that's ridiculous. I don't want to hear that. Mikaela Mayer is a decently big enough name that she can bring money wherever she goes. She's already fought in the UK before. Lauren Price has a decently good fan base behind her for the women's welterweight division. It's a perfectly fine fight. I don't see a Claressa Shields fight. I don't see... What are other people? Maybe Katie Taylor. Like, can we stop here? Really? There's one fight. It's Lauren Price. I don't want to hear anything else. Make it. And I think I'm picking Lauren Price in that. But really good showing by Mikaela Mayer. I don't want to undersell anything. Ryan looked like how... Ryan didn't look like she was injured or she was off. It just looked like Mayer had figured her out, which is impressive to see in a rematch that was so close the first time. All right, moving on here. Brian Norman, the assassin. I picked him by KO in the 7th round. I thought that Derek Cuevas was going to provide a little bit more opposition, if I'm being perfectly honest here. Look, ultimately, I knew that Cuevas was very limited coming into this fight. I knew that he was sort of a KO or get KO'd sort of fighter, which those kinds of fighters have decent levels of success at different altitudes of the sport, but ultimately, Norman just coasted with every shot Cuevas threw, took 1 or 2 decent punches in the first round or so, but even as he said in the post-fight interview, he shook that ring rust off real quick, got Cuevas out of there, and Cuevas essentially quit. You know, he got knocked down. He was able to make the count, but it was pretty obvious that he didn't want any more Brian Norman Jr. And great performance by Brian Norman. Exceeded my expectations clearly by getting a KO in the 3rd round. So really good stuff by him. Oh, sorry. Ultimately, I do think that Brian Norman is a credible next fight for the winner of Boots versus Emancistañones. I think that I'm going to get to some news in a little bit here, but I think that we could also potentially see Brian Norman Jr. versus Mario Barrios as a sort of Final Four bracket for undisputed at welterweight, which would be very nice. It would be nice for a change to have something like that. But yeah, Brian Norman Jr., really, really good fighter. I'm glad that he's finally... Do you remember... Okay, who remembers? A few years ago, do you remember the rumblings that Norman was putting hands on Bud Crawford in the gym? Am I the only one that remembers this? That he was sort of one of the best kept secrets in boxing? But then he had a couple of shaky performances. We saw him against Janelson Boca Chica get dropped. I was actually in person for that fight. And it just looked like, man, this kid doesn't have it. But then I think what happened was Brian Norman was like, hey, everyone, can you remember I'm literally 23, 24? He was still growing and learning on the job. And I really think now that he has this title, that he has that sort of wherewithal with him now, that unless you are a top contender in Santillan or another one of these guys, you're not going to be able to hang with him. He will destroy you. And another thing I have to add, by the way, is for all these people saying that Brian Norman's an email champ and all this stuff, okay, he destroyed Giovanni Santillan. Compare that to anyone else at welterweight in their best win. So Emancistañones, his best win is Raja Butayev, right? Okay. I still like the Santillan win over that because Santillan destroyed Alexis Rocha. Look at Boots' welterweight run. Okay, so let's see. We have the 2 fights with Karen Shikhedzian. Okay. We have the other fight with David Evanesian. Okay. But are those guys really better than Giovanni Santillan coming off of destroying Rocha? I'm not so sure. So just watch out for Brian Norman because I like his upside. I really do. As Mark Kriegel said, you're a young man in an old division, and I think we're going to see that play out. Also on the card, Bruce Carrington. So I picked him by decision. I thought that this was I don't want to say high-risk fight, but I thought that the best way to beat Enrique Vivas was just going to be to box, to stay composed, to weather a storm, and this was also, I believe, how many rounds was this scheduled for? I didn't think it was scheduled for that many rounds. 10? Okay. I just thought Vivas would stay unfinished, but no. Carrington destroyed him in 3 rounds. It's about time. That's not necessarily true, but, the Dana Coolwell fight was whatever. That was just a fight on a Mike Tyson undercard. Of course, the real bad look was against Suleiman Sagawa, where, again, Carrington, according to proper scoring, arguably lost, even if that's kind of controversial to say. But really good performance by Bruce Carrington. I like that he called out all of the champions in his weight class in the post-fight interview, except for Angelo Leo. But of course, Leo has to go see Tomoki Kameda in Japan. Good stuff by him. All around good stuff. But again, the title level is different. And featherweight is a shark tank where you think that you might be the biggest fish in the pond, and then you find a bigger one. So all of this is to say, to wrap it up sort of nicely, good stuff, man. Good stuff, Bruce Carrington. But again, it just sort of feels like the last 5 fights have been like, okay, now a title shot, now a title shot. Let's see what happens. Featherweight and super feather right now are kind of malleable. Anything could happen, but we want a title shot next. I think this is the one where we just go, okay, title shot now. No more taking a fight just to be on Mike Tyson's undercard. You've already captured the interim belt from Sagawa. Let's move on. You've done it. Title shot. Also, really want to give a shout. So that was the end of my predictions. But Tiger Johnson, who a lot of people have been very ho-hum about in his last few fights, well, he moved up to welterweight and destroyed Kendo Castaneda in 5 rounds. I thought he looked really good. Solid combination punching, the ability to navigate what Castaneda was throwing back at him. He didn't really get caught that much, if at all, and just pummeled the guy that is very hard to look superb against. Good stuff by him. If the weight has been killing him this whole time, then it's good that he moved up now rather than sticking around at 140 for one fight too many and getting beat, because that was a great performance by him. Someone with an Olympic pedigree, I think, should be starting to put together these kinds of performances at this stage in your career. And of course, the fight that I think still it has legs is Rohan Polanco. I want to see that fight against Tiger Johnson. Both men now are in 147 pounds. Let's work towards that fight. Let's build it up. That's a big one. Also, Emiliano Vargas getting a very nice second-round knockout over Giovanni Gonzalez. Obviously, Top Rank wants to build him up into a star. I do think that him and the other Vargas brothers are just too limited to have success. I've seen people say, oh yeah, it's not about if Emiliano Vargas wins a world title, it's about when. I think those stakes are absurd at the current moment. I think Vargas is a little bit too chin up in the air, too wild, too reckless, but that doesn't mean that he can't have star qualities and produce star level knockouts like what he produced last weekend. Good stuff there. All right, let's move on here to the rematch that was sort of unnecessary, but I understood why it happened. Tevin Farmer rematching William Zepeda, and I went by William Zepeda by knockout in the 11th. But no, as it turns out, Tevin Farmer has unmatchable heart. The amount of heart he showed in this fight, if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube, go to Golden Boy's page, try to find some highlights. It looked like Tevin Farmer broke his hand in the second round. It looked like Zepeda was going to stop him in rounds 2, 4, and 5. All looked like Zepeda was finally going downhill on Farmer. Here we go. This is the wrecking ball. And Farmer, every single time it looked like he was out of the fight, found another wind, found an uppercut to rock Zepeda, found a good counter shot over the top. And now you're at the point where, look at the discourse online. Look at what everyone's saying. It's no longer about, will Zepeda give Shakur a good fight? It's about, how easily does Shakur beat him? Does Shakur beat him by stoppage? Does he just outclass him every round? It seems like everyone is totally done with Zepeda, and I'm not so sure about that. I don't know why. I have to. It seems like I have to be the one to defend Zepeda here and say, I think Tevin Farmer is just very, very good and a very tricky matchup for a guy like Zepeda. I'm a huge Shakur Stevenson guy. I will pick Shakur Stevenson to beat William Zepeda. Make no mess about it. But Zepeda is a handful for anyone in this division. By the way, while we're on the topic of Zepeda and Shakur, I actually don't even think that that fight happens. I'd like to, if I may, briefly pull up one of my tweets here. We have I had DM'd someone. I said if Zepeda had a brain, he would drop the WBC interim and look to fight Tank. And as of 2 days ago, William Zepeda is reinserted as the WBA #1 official mandatory at 135 pounds. That's right. So William Zepeda is now the #1 contender in the WBA. And by the way, for if you don't know how sanctioning bodies work, if you are the interim champion by one's division's metric, that's you're not supposed to be the #1 contender in other sanctioning bodies. The fact that that has happened, maybe it's a mistake, maybe there'll be some sort of rankings readjustment, but it looks like Zepeda might be angling for a Gervonta Tank Davis fight now. And that's going to be absurd. If we've done all of this, if all of this posturing about Zepeda versus Shakur, it's going to be Zepeda versus Shakur for like a year now. If Zepeda changes tune and goes and fights Tank, wow, what a waste of Shakur Stevenson's time. It's absurd that a mandatory challenger has been this, it's not all on Zepeda, of course. It's on the team. It's on the promoters, management, all of that. But man, that would just be so frustrating. Would it not? I think so. Let's move on here, though. Oscar Collazo by KO in the 5th round. So now you might be asking yourself, well, hold on. You said green is a good prediction. Yellow means that you got the fighter right, but the method wrong. What's purple? Purple is when I get it exactly bang on, because Oscar Collazo picked up a 5th round stoppage over his opponent from the past weekend. Exactly as I called it. Look, Edwin Cano, he is good. He is a respectable opponent, but you're dealing with a guy in Oscar Collazo who is a pound for pound level fighter. That's just how it is. I think that Oscar Collazo, he directly called out Melvin Jerusalem after the fight. I'd love to see that next. It's a rematch that, of course, their first fight wasn't all too competitive, but the run that Melvin Jerusalem has been on since that fight has been nothing short of impressive. Give me that next. I don't even want to hang on this too long, but Oscar Collazo, what a fighter, what a gem, and thank you to Golden Boy for getting behind this man and really making him a worldwide sensation, I think, because Oscar Collazo could have been one of these guys. Honestly, look at Mini Pacman, right? Look at Eric Rosa. I think Collazo could have ended up a lot like him, where you're not fighting with a major broadcaster. You're not under the guise of one of these big promoters who gets you a lot of eyeballs. And yeah, but no, he's on a decently big stage. Very good stuff. There you go. All right, let's move on here to the final prediction. So I went with Yokasta Valle by unanimous decision. Ultimately, she wins by split decision. I still think that that deserves the green light, though, especially because I didn't think this was a split decision. Look, Marlon Esparza is a very great fighter. Very great. But I just don't think that she had enough. She also blew the weight for this fight, which, in my mind, subtracts you at least a point, because that's unacceptable, especially for when you're fighting a woman like Yokasta Valle, who's one of the best women in the world, regardless of whether or not she has a title at the moment. But yeah, Yokasta Valle, what can you say? Very fun fighter. Love her fights. Good stuff. Let's move on, though, to everyone's favorite segment, Who's That Boxer? So this week was a little bit shaky on who I wanted to pick, but ultimately I'm going to go double dip here, because who is that boxer? Do you recognize this man? He doesn't have one belt on his shoulder. He's got two, and that's because this man is, of course, the new IBF world champion, Masamichi Yabuki, who picked up an excellent 12th round stoppage over Angel Ayala to become the new IBF flyweight champion. What else can you say? amazing, amazing fighter. The reason why I picked this photo, essentially, by the way, is because as I was watching this fight happening in Japan early in the morning, I was just taking some screenshots and they had the camera come over to this. And I think it's so funny that you can actually see, I think that's just someone on Yabuki's team recording with his cell phone in the title here in that little mirror part, which I always thought was a fun detail. But this is such a cool photo. I mean, look at that. His former title on one shoulder, his new title on the other, the big slice under his cheek, blood running down. What can you say besides this man is a warrior? As I had said, those wins over Sivanathan Shinga, the win over Kenshiro Taraji, too much experience, too dynamic. And Angel Ayala, just from the first, dropped him in the first, right? The second, and then ultimately stopped him in the 12th. Complete performance. And I think that if Yabuki didn't have to deal with this eye slash, like, I don't even want to call it a cut, because look at how bad that is. I think this could have been an even easier night's work. But ultimately, credit to this man, a true champion who is proving that, one, you don't need a 0 to be a great fighter. You just need to take on big challenges, have heart, and ultimately, a little bit of power can get you a long way. Great stuff by this man. It was a pleasure to have picked him successfully to win. I picked him by KO the 9th. I knew it would go late, but a 12th round knockout. Good stuff by that man. Let's move on here. So I said Oscar Koyazo called out Melvin Jerusalem, and the reason why he called him out in that Yudai Shigioka is, of course, Jerusalem beat Shigioka even more clearly than the first time. This was almost not even a contest. Completely outclassed him. I got that one completely wrong. My apologies there. But I don't know. I knew that Jerusalem was on a great run. I just figured that Shigioka, I just thought he would have a lot more. I was really deflated from that performance. It honestly wasn't even that good of a watch. That's how poor he performed. But Jerusalem, yeah, just picked up a clean-cut win. What else can I say? Let's see the Collazo fight. And then, of course, my guy, Luis Alberto Lopez. I had picked him by 4th round knockout, but of course he had to outdo me. KO in the first. Good stuff by him. He's back in the mix. He's still under contract with Top Rank. I know everyone talks about the brain bleed, but we just have to see if he is consistently getting medically cleared by proper commissions. There's not a lot we can do to stop him from fighting. So we'll see, but he's, again, so dynamic, fun fighter to watch, even in Mexican club shows. Let's move on here to the fights that are coming up this week. And of course, the first event that I'm going to cover here is Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic. This was supposed to be a triple header of Joe Joyce versus Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte ultimately has to pull out. There was also supposed to be Richard Riakporhe taking on Lawrence Okolie. That fight has disintegrated. If you want my honest opinion, I think you're going to hear Agit Kabayel versus Lawrence Okolie sometime in the near future. I think it's no mistake that Lawrence Okolie is the number 1 contender in the WBC. I don't think Agit Kabayel is going to get the Alexander Usyk fight, and I think that the WBC might make the Agit Kabayel Lawrence Okolie fight. Both men are with Frank Warren to some degree. I do think that fight might materialize, even though that kind of sucks for Richard Riakporhe. But let's move on from fights that are not occurring to the fights that are. Joe Joyce versus Filip Hrgovic. And this might upset a lot of people, okay? But I don't look at the odds. I don't let money sway me. If I honestly had to pick between Joe Joyce and Filip Hrgovic over 10 rounds, give me the Juggernaut by unanimous decision. Now I know, I'm sure Hrgovic is a minus 400 favorite. I'm sure everyone's so concerned. Why is Joyce still fighting? He doesn't have anything left. All of these things. I understand. I'm sure if you want to leave a comment, let me know how stupid it was that I'm picking Joyce. But every week I got to pick one. I got to go with one gut pick. And I'm going to say that Joyce turns back the clock here. Let me just run something by you, and then you can see if you still think my prediction's absurd, okay? Filip Hrgovic's career has been of the following major moments. Fighting Zhilei Zhang, in which he got dropped and arguably absolutely lost that fight to Zhilei Zhang. Okay. He fought... Who is the fighter that... I want to say Simon Keane, but it's always the other one. That's how these things always work. He went on Dempsey McKean. Yeah, of course, yes. He fought Dempsey McKean, where both men looked terrible. Terrible. It was one of the lowest output, horrible fights I've ever seen. I had a job working at a pool, and I was literally more interested in looking at pool water cycle through jets than I was watching that fight. Horrible fight. He got the 12th round TKO after McKean basically just didn't have enough energy anymore. So, okay. So, great win over an undefeated guy again. Then he fought Mark Demori, which, are you kidding me? Like, this was his big tune-up because he was IBF mandatory, so he was going to sit on his mandatory spot forever. So, okay, yeah, you knocked him out in a minute and so. Wow, Mark Demori, the guy whose biggest claim to fame was getting destroyed by David Haye a decade ago. And then he fights Daniel Dubois. I picked Dubois to knock him out, and Dubois stops him. I am on record picking Daniel Dubois to stop Hrgovic, by the way. Just saying. But look, that's his run of late. An arguable loss to... Wait, hold on. Let me get this in the camera here. Arguable loss to Zhilei Zhang that I think is pretty clear-cut, especially with the knockdown. Dempsey McKean fight. Horrible look. Struggled, terrible, whatever. Mark Demori. Wow, the easiest tune-up of all time in the heavyweight division on a Riyadh season card. And then Daniel Dubois, you got battered. This is the guy that I'm supposed to say is some kind of, boogeyman or all these things. Look, it's not the 2000s anymore. It's not about, Eastern Europeans or where they control everything. They control the sport. No, it's... I think Joyce, even though Joyce, coming off of that loss to Derek Chisora, okay, Derek Chisora then went out there, fought another one of these guys that everyone constantly talks about, where Chisora fought Otto Wallin and just destroyed Wallin easily, even worse than the Joyce fight was actually competitive, whereas Chisora just destroyed Wallin, just destroyed him. Then of course, yeah, the other two losses in his career are to Zhilei Zhang, that I think also applies to Filip Hrgovic. I think Zhang beat both of these guys. So say what you want. Here is my really passionate take as to why I'm picking Joyce. If this all blows up in my face, fine. But I want to be the one. If this craziness happens, I'm going to say, look, the writing was on the wall. Filip Hrgovic was built up to be a bunch of nothing. And I think even with a win here, I don't see him capturing a world title. I think that there are many much better heavyweight contenders that would beat Filip Hrgovic on most nights. Let's move on here. Co-main event, David Adelaide taking on TKV. I got to go Adelaide by KO in the 4th round. Look, I'm sure that this fight will be decently fun as long as it lasts, but David Adelaide was really impressive in the way he just destroyed Solomon Dakers in his last fight. I think Jamie TKV has ultimately, yes, he's looked fine, he's looked good, but this is the British heavyweight level we're talking about here. I just think Adelaide is just too good. He's just much better all around. Give me him by knockout. Also on this card, we have the Commonwealth Super Lightweight title between Jack Rafferty and Corey O'Regan. And Rafferty is going to, I think, buzzsaw through this guy. Corey O'Regan, I looked into him a little bit. He's got 14 fights on his resume. 13 of those fights are to fighters with a losing record. Do you know what that last fight is that the fighter did not have a losing record? They were 1-1. This guy has a completely built up record. You know, BoxRec isn't God, it isn't everything, but Rafferty is considered top 30 in this division. Corey O'Regan is barely top 300 in this division. I got to go with Rafferty. Rafferty is putting together some really good wins. I expect him to get a KO and before 6 rounds are up. Also, Mark Chamberlain, Turki Al-Sheikh's favorite fighter, returns on this card. And of course, I have to mention Turki Al-Sheikh's favorite fighter. I think he'll get a UD. He's fighting a journeyman of sorts, but I don't know. I think it'll just be a confidence builder. I don't even know if he'll look that great, but it's happening. Let's move on. Lots of boxing to get into. Man, oh man. Here we go. Richard Kiki Torrez taking on Guido Vianello. Vianello coming off of a career best performance where he stopped Arslanbek Makhmudov, which is very impressive. I believe he did that as an underdog. Of course, Richard Torrez buzzsawing through heavyweight so far in his career. 12-0, should be 12 knockouts, but he has a DQ win because it was, what was his name? I can picture him in my head here. Right, Joey Jaweko, or however you say that. He basically just didn't want any more. So that was a DQ, but coming off of a really good win over Isaac Munoz, who sadly I think would be a much better fighter if he had a proper team behind him. But moving on from that, look, Torres, he's knocking everyone out. He's got that Olympic pedigree. He's got a Mike Tyson sort of style. I know everyone likes to compare every heavyweight to Mike Tyson, but when you're dealing with Richard Torrez, who's a shorter guy for this division, he's stocky, but he's athletic, he's fast, in and out movement. Ultimately, I think every knockout artist has a time where they hit a little bit of a speed bump, and that's why I'm going to say Torrez by decision. I think Vianello, a man also with an Olympic pedigree, let's not forget that. Yes, he's been stopped before, but that was to Johnny Rice on a cut. That wasn't, an actual knockout. And he also fought Efe Ajagba tooth and nail in a fight he arguably should have won. And Efe Ajagba is a massive puncher. And he withstood an entire, 10-round contest against him. So I think Vianello, he took 10 rounds of Ajagba. He didn't get phased at all by anything Makhmudov threw. I think Torres will win. I think Torres will be impressive. I think that, honestly, going to a decision will be a really good experience for Richard Torres. But I do think he goes to a decision. If he knocks out Guido Vianello, I'll start considering him in that top 15 heavyweight, top 10 heavyweight discussion here, because that would be mightily impressive. Also on this card, Lindolfo Delgado is taking on Elvis Rodriguez in a very, very, very good fight. I gave it 3 verys just now, but it really is a good fight. Elvis Rodriguez on a great career run of form, taking out guys like Victor Postal. He's got other good wins on that resume. Lindolfo Delgado, also a man that's racking up really good wins, good performances. 2 really viable contenders in the 140-pound division. But ultimately, I just think Lindolfo Delgado, I think a little bit more physical, a little bit bigger of a fighter. I like a lot of what he does. I like his sort of smart offense that he has. And Elvis Rodriguez sometimes has a flat performance. I think he's a little bit less consistent. And I just think that Delgado, the smarter pressure, I think more consistent game planning, I'll take him to edge out a decision, but I really think it'll be a 6-4, maybe 7-3 kind of fight. But Rodriguez absolutely will have moments. It's not so much a disparagement against Rodriguez as it is an endorsement of Delgado. Also on this card, let's move on to Abdullah Mason taking on Carlos Ornelas. This was originally supposed to be between what's his name? What's his name? Man, I am having one today. But the man that William Zepeda knocked out relatively fast. Yeah, Giovanni Cabrera. This was originally going to be Abdullah Mason versus Giovanni Cabrera, which I hope they revisit that fight after this one. Cabrera did have to pull out from some kind of injury, but give me Abdullah Mason here, knockout in the third round. Ornelas, good record, right? 28-4. But Ornelas' last loss came to the current featherweight champion of the world, Rafael Espinosa. I think Ornelas just a little bit too small. I don't think he's going to have enough offense coming back to get Mason's respect. And I expect a quick night here at the office for one of the best young rising stars in the entire sport, regardless of weight. Also, this is actually a really good card. Like I knew it was good, but I'm just looking at it again. We also have Jahai Tucker taking on Troy Williamson, which, how funny is this, right? To see Troy Williamson fighting over here in Las Vegas. But yeah, Troy Williamson, very, very good fighter. I know losing 3 of your last 4 is not the best look, but he's fighting some of the absolute best guys over there in the UK. You're talking about guys like top contenders like Josh Kelly, Edgarco, or however you say that, Ishmael Davis, who's not so much a top contender anymore, but again, good names. Jahai Tucker is a very workmanlike effort sort of fighter. He doesn't often win fights super dominantly, but he often does enough, has enough in the tank to gut out those wins. And give me him here by unanimous decision. But again, I think over the 10-round distance, I think it'll be Tucker winning 7 or 8 rounds, maybe just 6. I think he gets the win, but Williamson, as long as he can handle this weight class, because oh, no, it's at middleweight. Okay, never mind. I thought this might have been at 54. No, if it's at middleweight, Williamson should be able to make the weight. Should be for a very good fight. And then finally on this card, Albert Chop Chop Gonzalez taking on the man who just fought, Shoo Carrington on the Mike Tyson undercard, Dana Coolwell from Australia. Give me Gonzalez by unanimous decision. Ultimately, I don't think Gonzalez has fought anyone nearly as good as Dana Coolwell to this point in his career. And I think that sometimes when you get that next little step up in competition, it results in you having to go to the distance when you're not accustomed to that. But I expect him to look very impressive here. Top Rank is clearly very high on him. Give me him by decision. Also on this card, Steven Navarro. I think he'll obviously pick up a win, as well as Demler Zamora, but I'll mention them briefly before moving on. Right. Let's get to a little bit of news before I get to the rest of the fights here. I should have put this beforehand, but oh well, too late now. Yeah, so according to reports, Top Rank and PBC are going to start working together. I wanted to get to this before talking about the PBC card in just a little bit, but ultimately, I think that TKO boxing deal, the way that Turkiala Sheikh has been talking about his vision for boxing and all of that, has sorry, hold on. Okay. Yeah, so Turkiala Sheikh, I think, put a lot of fear into promoters across the world. I think that originally he was viewed as this guy who he'll give us money for ridiculous fight purses, but he doesn't want control. He doesn't want to take over. He's just looking to facilitate tourism. But I think now with this TKO deal with Dana White, I think boxing promoters know how Dana White operates. They know that Dana White doesn't want to play. He doesn't want to make deals. Dana White wants control. And I think that now when you see Top Rank and PBC working together, that's because these are 2 of the predominant American promoters that are left. Yes, they have both. I don't want to hear that PBC has not worked with Turkiala Sheikh. That's not exactly correct, especially when you look back at the August show. Look at some of the fighters that were on that card. Again, I know that a lot of the times it's not PBC, it's Tom Brown or whatever. But for the sake of shortcutting it, Top Rank and PBC have both dabbled with Turkey a little bit, but they also have made it pretty clear that they're not fully in, right? DAZN, guys like with Matchroom, Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Queensbury, they're all over Turkey Alashik, right? Well, he's the greatest. We want to do a 5v5, all this stuff. They've not been as gung-ho. And I think now with the TKO boxing deal being announced, it's even more so that, hey, we have to join together here. There's another big competitor around the corner. We got to make sure that we can survive this. And ultimately, that's why you see certain reports like here from Brunch Boxing that Stephen Fulton Jr., who just became featherweight champion of the world, is apparently being discussed to fight Oshaki Foster, who's a top-ranked fighter. I think that you're going to see more of these sorts of fight announcement rumors where you're going to have a clearly PBC guy against the top-ranked guy to make, again, this is a good fight, a really fun fight. Of course, Fulton would be trying to win a title in a third division, but he's very skilled. Oshaki Foster also very, very skilled. I think it would make for a very good fight. One that I would actually have a lot of trouble picking between. I like Oshaki Foster a lot. I've been to his fights. Good fighter. Stephen Fulton Jr., I'm glad I picked him to beat or to win his title in his last fight. Really good stuff. Hopefully we see more of this. This is really big news. I had to give it some time. And in speaking of Top Rank and PBC, let's get to the PBC in part, I'll say, card this upcoming weekend. Tszyu taking on Joey Spencer. Yeah. But look, hey, Tszyu's back, okay? Look, Tszyu makes 154 exciting. For whatever you want to say about his last two fights, yes, they did not go his way. You know, all of that. He is a good fighter in a very, very good weight class. Ultimately, I think that Tszyu went up against two buzzsaws in Fondora and Murtazaliyev, okay? I have to say that he gets through the level of Joey Spencer. Now, I know what a lot of people are going to say. You know what most people are going to say? Joey Spencer lost to Jesus Ramos. That's why he's going to lose to Tszyu. I'm not going to even have to make that argument. I don't need to point to losing to Ramos as a reason why he'll lose. I'll actually point to his last fight that I guarantee a fraction of people actually bothered to watch, because it was on this like Massachusetts or New England sort of boxing night thing. It's also where Rashid Yalis has been having his last few fights. In any case, he did not look very good at all, right? I'll double check. I'm speaking very confidently about this. Let me double check. Yes. So in his last fight in the Dort Financial Center, he fought 9-0 Miguel Angel Hernandez to a majority decision. And I thought that was a very, very close fight. And I don't think getting majority decisions over relatively unknown 9-0 guys is enough to beat a guy like Tszyu, who again has been a world champion. Give me Tszyu by knockout in the 8th round. This is a scheduled 10-rounder. I think Tszyu is going to have maybe a shaky moment or two early on, but I think once he's a very self-confident person. I know that now he's coming off the knockout. We'll have to see how that affects his psyche, but based on the way he came back from the Fondora loss and the way he just brought it to Murtazaliyev, I obviously don't want him to be reckless. I don't think that is advisable whatsoever. But I think he needs to come out there and he needs to fight a Tszyu fight. I don't want to see him all of a sudden try to box and all of a sudden try to be a back foot, counterpuncher. Beat Tszyu. If you are Tszyu in this fight, I expect you to beat Joey Spencer. And by the way, I don't know if this is coming from exactly Joey Spencer himself or what this is, but apparently him or his team have been considering pulling out because all 3 judges in this fight will be Australian. Yeah. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You already decided to come over to Australia. You already decided to take this fight. But because the judges being from Australia, you're not going to take it. That either reeks of either nerves or you're not confident. If I think I am the best fighter in the world, right? The best fighter, which I think most boxers who are in world title contention should believe, right? I should believe I'm the best. Really? The judges being from Australia, you're going to pull out of the fight? If you thought that you're the best fighter in the world, you don't think that you're going to easily beat this guy, outclass him 10-0? Even if the judges give him 4 extra rounds, you still win. So I don't like those kinds of comments. I think the officiating will be fine. I'm sure. If Tszyu wins by horrible robbery decision, then we can come back to this video. Then you can leave a comment. See, I told you Australian judges are all corrupt. But until that happens, Tszyu by knockout in a fairly officiated fight. Also on this card, we saw on the last Australian card with Keith Thurman, one half of the fight of the year, or at least fight of the year contender, between Endre Cevada and Cesar Tapia. And here he is, Endre Cevada from, oh my goodness, frustrating. Endre Saavedra from South Africa, I believe. He's taking on Mikkel Nielsen from Norway or Denmark. I don't know, one of those free healthcare places. I think he'll win. I think he'll pick up a nice knockout in the 6th round. His opponent's never been stopped before, but Saavedra, if nothing else, punches like a mule. I expect him to get a nice knockout and stay a contender in this middleweight division. The only other name I'll really highlight here on this card is Andrei Mikhailovich, who's coming off his loss against unified world champion Janibek Alimkhanuly. He's taking a fight against this guy, Blake Wells, here. I expect Mikhailovich to win, but Blake Wells, never been stopped before, decently young himself. It's a 6-rounder. Give me Mikhailovich by unanimous decision. And speaking of Mikhailovich's last opponent, Janibek, it's Janibek Alimkhanuly fight week, and he is taking on Ngamissengue. Now, you might be asking, oh my goodness, what is this nonsense? Janibek, I want to see him fight Carlos Adames. I want to see him fight Hamza Shiraz. Why is he wasting time with this nobody that he cherry-picked? This guy doesn't deserve a title shot. Well, if you have been following the Phil Likes Fights Twitter account, then you would know that this man is more than deserving of a title shot. Because on July 30th of last year, I've been talking about this guy since most of you even knew that this fight was even happening. I said, I hope Ngamissengue gets a big fight soon. This guy is good. He is really good. Like, actually go and watch his fight when he upset the formerly top contender, Fyodor Szczerzekin, okay? Watch that fight. That was in Poland, right? That was in Wrocław. Fyodor, 22-0, the big hometown homecoming. And Anuel just said, actually, no, you don't get a hometown big win because I'm going to stop your momentum right there. This guy is really good. He is, he's French. He's got that sort of French boxing style where it's sort of half pretty, half effective. I really think that this guy deserves a middleweight title shot. Middleweight is paper thin right now, but this guy, I'm glad to see him get a huge opportunity again, going to the backyard of another top fighter in this weight class like Janibek. Ultimately, I was flirting with the idea of Janibek by decision, but Alimkhanuly has proven that unless your name is Denzel Bentley, he is able to score knockouts at the title level. Janibek by TKO in the 10th round. But I really hope for everyone that Anuel puts together a really, really good performance. Because, again, I don't want to hear that he's not deserving, that this is some kind of cherry pick. I really rate this guy. I hope that this doesn't blow up badly. Some of my takes do end up aging not the best, but I hope that this isn't one. Anuel, I hope you do well, but Janibek by TKO in the 10th. But this card is very, very loaded. We also have the return of Zwarbek Sultan Zorbek, who's taking on former IBF title challenger Azinga Fuzili. Fuzili, 2 losses in his career to Kenichi Crushright Ogawa and Shavkatjan Rakhimov. Ultimately, I think Zorbek kind of struggles to finish guys at the top level here. This is for the IBF Intercontinental title. Give me Sultan Zorbek by unanimous decision. I think Azinga Fuzili, very, very durable. If you ever watched Azinga Fuzili versus Kenichi Ogawa, you would see just how much Fuzili can take. Maybe that chin is cracked, but Fuzili's on a 3-fight win streak since those fights. I think he's durable and good enough to get to a decision, but I don't see Sultan Zorbek losing here. Also in this card, the return of the two-time Olympic world champion, Bakidir Big Uzbek Jalalov, who is taking on Ihor Shevajutsky. Oh, wow. I think I said that perfectly on the first try. Oh, I thought this was in a different order. Okay, hey, actually, let's talk about Batir Zhukambayev versus Kane Gardner. Kane Gardner coming off of a very flat performance in a fight he was expected to win over in the UK. This is a very strange matchup that I don't even really understand how it came about. Ultimately, I don't think Gardner will get stopped. I think Zhukambayev, like Zorbek, sort of struggles to finish opponents at times. I'll take him by unanimous decision. If he does get the knockout, then maybe I read it wrong, but we'll see. Now let's get to the big Uzbek. Okay. Bakidir Jalalov, yeah, I think he knocks out Shevajutsky in the 4th round. I think he'll have a little bit of a feel-out process. I think he'll realize that Shevajutsky doesn't have a lot to offer in terms of counter-offense, and Jalalov will get him out of there. Because, again, who are you realistically picking against Bakidir Jalalov? Who? A lot of people like to complain that he sticks around in the amateurs too long and he needs to stop beating up on kids. But realistically, there's no one that you're confidently picking to beat Jalalov. Excuse me. Other than like the world champions. But besides literally the highest level, there's almost no one that you could confidently pick to beat Jalalov. Give me him by knockout in the 4th. Final fight I want to highlight here is, of course, the return of one half of the Ring Magazine 2024 Fight of the Year, a man that I personally went to upstate New York to watch him fight, Ray Ford, Otabek Kolmatov. I think he gets a nice get-back win. I think my head's blocking the way here, but I think that knockout in the 7th round, I think he'll just need the first 6 rounds to get that rust off, get his confidence back a little bit. What's this guy's name? Joey Kanoy. I think that Kanoy is decently durable and will be able to weather the first 6 rounds or so, but ultimately Kolmatov, he has 11 knockouts in his 12 pro wins. I think that'll materialize in the second half of the fight, and he'll get a nice vintage Otabek knockout. Very nice. Oof. Let's move on here, because there still is more boxing, whether or not you like it. But in all seriousness, we also have Pro Box TV, and it's on a Saturday. No, hey, they're too big time now for Wednesday night fights. But yeah, so we have a top welterweight contender here in Ricardo Salas Rodriguez taking on Kent Cruz. And again, Salas is coming off of a win over knocking out Roman Villa. So he's going to knock out Kent Cruz, right? I mean, come on. So Kent Cruz's whole career has been basically the following. Okay, he's 17-1-3. He's coming off of a very nondescript win. But before that, he got destroyed by Gary Antoine Russell in an unneeded fight in 1 round. He spent 2 fights back-to-back with Enrico Gogokia on PBC undercards that were draws both times, in which he arguably could have lost. And then beyond that, that's pretty much it. And most of his career, he's been a 140-pounder. I think Ricardo Salas Rodriguez, too offensively destructive. He's going to run through this guy. KO6 actually might be even giving Kent too much credit. I think It might even be much sooner than that. The only reason I'm giving him till the 6th round is because this is a short notice replacement, I believe. And there's always a feel-out process when you're taking on a guy on short notice. Also on this card, Myquan Williams, a guy that I have been heralding. I've been screaming his name from the mountaintops. Gotta watch out for this guy. Myquan Williams back against a very sturdy operator in the 135 to 140 pound divisions. That being Antonio Moran. You know, Moran only been stopped twice in his career by Devin Haney and Andy Ruiz. The only problem with that, though, is I believe it's going to be 3 times this coming weekend. Give me Myquan Williams, knockout in the 6th round. This guy is so fun to watch. Go back, try to find the fight between Myquan Williams and what was his opponent's name, who was also undefeated? Yeah, Luis Feliciano. That's a great fight to watch. Coming off of a really good fight against Levisas Williams, in which he got him out of there pretty easily. Yeah, Myquan Williams is one to watch. Only 26 years old. I like him. I like him in this fight. I think he stops Antonio Moran and makes a real statement. Also on this card, Gio Lopez, I think Giovanni Lopez, he's taking on Rene Alvarado. Alvarado, I think, has been at the not exactly world title level anymore, but again, gave a really good fight to William Zepeda, gave good fights to a lot of... let me just run through Rene Alvarado's last few fights. So he fought William Zepeda, Lamont Roach, Roger Gutierrez, and then Hayato Tsutsumi, who just knocked him out in 5 rounds. So you might go, oh, okay, well, sure, he's getting stopped now. Lopez by stoppage. I'll hold your horses. I'm going to pick him by decision. I think Hayato Tsutsumi is one of the best prospects / contenders in the entire world. I'm not so sure if Gio Lopez is on that level quite yet. I think he'll get a nice, clear-cut, unanimous decision, and this will be where, okay, this veteran took me the distance. Now I can learn from that. I can grow, move on to bigger and better things. Also on the card, I don't think that they really warranted full predictions, but look out for Haven Brady Jr., Dante Benjamin, former top-ranked guys, or they might even be under contract, but fighting on this Pro Box card, and Beckner Magambet, also on this card. I think he's one to watch out for. Whew. All right, guys, that's all the... just kidding. 2 last quick hitters, and then we'll finally wrap this up. Tina Ruprecht is fighting Yamanaka, that being Sumire Yamanaka, for the undisputed atomweight world titles. Tina Ruprecht, only 1 career loss. She's 14-1. That one loss, though, is to the pound-for-pound queen and all-time great, Sinisa Estrada. Ultimately, I'm going to back Tina Ruprecht here to win a unanimous decision. I think Yamanaka is going to bring it for as much as she can, but again, I just don't think that... But again, I made this mistake. Hold on. Let me correct myself. I made this mistake with the Tiara Brown-Sky Nicholson fight where I said I didn't think Brown had enough real experience at a high level to cross that hump. But just like that fight, I think Yamanaka, obviously, by being a world title holder, deserves to fight for undisputed. But I'm going to go with Ruprecht here. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Also, tomorrow, right? Yep, tomorrow, we have a fight between Brad Sting Rea, who follows me on Twitter, by the way. You should too. And Daniel Blenda dos Santos from France, despite having the name dos Santos. But this is happening on literally a few days' notice. This is originally supposed to be Shaken Pitters versus dos Santos, but Pitters had to pull out. Rea's in. Now you know my rule. My rule is the following. I never trust anyone when they come in on short notice. I just can't do it. Training camps are so necessary at a certain level in boxing. But I've thought about a few things. Obviously, most people know Rea for the loss against Tyler Denny. As you may or may not know, I am a huge Tyler Denny fan. I think he's very good. And I didn't realize that Rea had since moved up all the way to 175. And his last 3 or 4 fights have been at that weight. I thought he would have been a middle or super middle moving up on short notice to fight for a light heavyweight title against a fully fledged light heavyweight. But he's been at 175 his last few fights. I've been following him on Twitter because he follows me. He has been itching for a fight. He is constantly talking about, I'm in the gym, just need a call. I'm constantly training. The other thing is, this guy, Dos Santos, he's 34. Brad Rea, 27. Give me the younger man who has been itching for a fight to come in on a few days' notice and win a clear-cut decision. Brad Rea, you follow me on Twitter so you get bonus points. Make me proud, man. Make me proud. But ultimately, everyone, thank you for watching what I imagine is going to be probably my longest episode. But there is so much boxing this weekend. I hope you're able to watch a decent amount of it. And with that all being said, I will catch you next week.